let's go ahead and start. So good evening, everyone. And thank you for taking time to join our group this evening. I felt the importance of scheduling tonight's town hall meeting as an additional resource for the Cornerstone community. Even though I strongly support receiving the COVID vaccine, I'm not in the medical field. That's why I invited the two individuals to speak with us tonight. Not only are they in the medical field, both are strong supporters of Cornerstone Center by serving as members on the board of directors. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Ladage. Jennifer started on the board in 2014, replacing another pediatrician in the group that was relocated to Chicago and no longer able to serve on the board. She joined the board as a medical advisor, and we're glad she did. She completed her MD at St. Louis University School of Medicine in '91, and after a short run in private practice, returned to St. Louis University as a faculty member in the Department of Pediatrics in 1999. She's in the General Academic Pediatric Division, which is responsible for teaching resident physicians and medical students outpatient pediatric care. She directs an international healthcare clinic, which focuses on addressing the impact of trauma on the growth, development, and social emotional well-being of refugees and international adoptees. She's a native of the greater Cincinnati, Ohio area and married a St. Louis native 31 years ago. They have 4 children, now in their early to mid-20s. 3 are adopted from China, and the 4th, Miss Audrey, is currently a teacher at Cornerstone. Next is Dale Lewis. Dale is the pharmacy manager at St. Louis Children's Hospital. He's been a board member for about a year, and he has a 6- and 8-year-old Mitchell and Marshall, and they both attended Cornerstone from the time they were babies until they started kindergarten. His wife, Julie, and Dale are both involved with have both been involved with Cornerstone for the last 8 years. So this evening, I just wanted to mention a couple things before we start. We have a very small group at this time. So let's just take questions and answers at the end in a more informal basis. During the presentation, I ask that everyone remains muted. It is being recorded, so we can share it later once we find out and decide how to do that. But we will try to use this as a tool and a resource for later on. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Ladage and start with Dr. Ladage.
All right, thank you, Karen. So Karen asked me to just do an overview of COVID, and I know that there's been lots of information on the news. So this will be kind of a very brief kind of overview of the whole pandemic to hopefully set a little bit of the stage for Dale's talk on the specifically on the vaccine. But as you know, COVID-19, or more specifically named SARS-CoV-2, it's a virus that appeared first in 2019 in Asia and is now spread all over the world, making it a pandemic. Currently, there's over 100 million cases worldwide and more than 2 million deaths worldwide. In the US alone, there's greater than 27 million cases, and so the US accounts for about 25% of the entire world's cases and deaths. So we know that in the US, I guess in around the world, this pandemic is affecting the elderly, minorities, and those with chronic health and immune conditions far more severely than others. So It's a respiratory illness, often presenting with fever, cough, difficulty breathing, headaches, muscle aches, but kind of the hallmark symptom has been a loss of taste and smell. The virus is usually spread person to person through respiratory droplets. And so the recommendations to try to decrease the spread have included staying 6 feet away, where typically the respiratory droplets will fall within that realm, to wearing masks, because masks can decrease the transmission. There's two main types of tests to detect the virus. If you've been exposed or if you're having symptoms, one is a rapid test that usually involves swabbing your nose or your mouth. That is looking for proteins of the virus, whereas the gold standard, use that loosely, is the PCR testing, which actually looks for the genetic material of the virus. So typically there are false negatives in the antigen test if a person's asymptomatic, but otherwise the tests are pretty good, especially in symptomatic individuals. So once you're exposed, you typically, if you develop infection, you develop it in 2 to 14 days. The symptoms can be very mild. In fact, for the majority of Americans, they will be mild, but in higher risk groups, the symptoms can be very severe, life-threatening, and require ICU care for weeks to even a couple months. So how does this affect children? Children have not been affected with the same severity as adults and high-risk populations. However, children less than 1 year of age have been impacted and have higher rates than any other age in childhood and can be at risk for more severe disease. We also know with COVID that there's a form of the disease that's seen mainly in kids, and it's called MIS, or multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And that's where the virus can actually spread throughout the body and cause multiple organs to shut down and not function well. Fortunately, this is rare, but it does occur in children. So I thought it might be helpful if I just made a statement about viruses in general to kind of set the stage for Dale to talk about the vaccine. Viruses are often lumped with bacteria, which bacteria are single cell organisms that infect us. Viruses are actually not living organisms, but they contain some genetic material in the form of what's called DNA or RNA, just like the genetic material in our own cells. Viruses are reliant on getting into the cell so that they can then duplicate, and then the body can spread the infection. Viruses, their genetic material targets a specific type of cell, and that's why some viruses will go for blood cells or respiratory cells or GI cells. Again, once inside the cell uses, the virus uses the cell's structures to actually start duplicating it, and many copies of the virus can be made, and then it can be spread. General treatments for bacteria include antibiotics that can target, but these are often targeting things outside the cell, and they're not effective against viruses because they're inside the cell. So we are reliant on things like vaccines to develop to help the body identify the viruses and eliminate it prior to the virus being able to infect cells and cause disease. So on that note, I will hand it over to Dale and let you talk about, tell us more about the COVID-19 vaccine.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Ladaj. So I'm going to actually share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint that I'm going to show you guys. Oh, you've got it up. Okay. You beat me to it. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. And I think the million-dollar question is why get vaccinated, right? That's what we all really want to know. I think the big thing that I would say is that Really, the two vaccines that we have right now, which are made by Pfizer and Moderna, those are the two that are currently available in the US, and they've been shown to be highly effective at preventing COVID-19, really at 95% effectiveness for both of them. You know, they've been carefully evaluated in clinical trials, and they'll be authorized or approved only if they make it substantially less that you'll get COVID-19. So we're not bringing them to the market unless they're being proven to be effective. So based on what we know about vaccines for other diseases, and so far from the early data that we've received from clinical trials, the experts believe that getting a COVID-19 vaccine will help you also from getting seriously ill, even if you do get COVID-19. In fact, the last that I saw or heard, which was only a few days ago, was that out of all of the vaccines that people have gotten so far, nobody has died from the clinical trials. And I think that really says a lot. So getting vaccinated yourself may also protect the people around you, especially people at high risk. I know for myself, my mom is one of those people. And, you know, so if you are not thinking about getting vaccinated for yourself because you're healthy and you feel like you don't need it, think about the people that you interact with every day that may not be so lucky. So going to the next slide. And Jenny kind of talked about this a little bit, but you know, COVID-19 so far has affected 27.2 million people in the US, and we're closing in on 500,000 people that have been killed. The other reason to get vaccinated is that the side effects from the vaccine are much milder than getting COVID-19 itself, and are less likely to have a long acting side effect as compared to the virus, which in some people has had very considerable longer lasting effects. Some people still have lost their smell or taste, and other people have had some organ failure issues and things like that. So getting the vaccine certainly is much milder than actually having the disease. Obviously, the more people that vaccinate, that leads to herd immunity that we've all talked about, that I'll touch on in a second. The sooner people vaccinate, the sooner we get back to normal. And I put that in air quotes here because we don't know what the new normal is going to look like, obviously. So it's also possible that many businesses may require that you do this. There's been talk that some airlines, some sporting events, there's been some articles that have been published, may actually require that you show proof of vaccination. And I think it's very early to know that, but that may be a thing in the near future, where if you want to jump on an airline and go somewhere, you're going to have to show that you've been vaccinated. So those that aren't, you know, that are thinking that they may not want to get vaccinated, may be forced to if they want to do the things that we consider normal. It's free. The government has made it free to everybody, so you can't beat free. And thus far, 10% of Missourians have already done it. And as I like to say, all the cool kids are doing it, so we might as well jump on board, right? Going to the next slide. So we touched a little bit on herd immunity, right? What is it? So really, herd immunity just means that enough people in the community are protected from getting the disease because they've either already had the disease and they've reached some immunity because of that, or because that they've been vaccinated. So it makes it harder for the disease to spread from person to person. And it even protects those that cannot be vaccinated, like newborns, because obviously if you can't replicate the virus goes away. So the percentage of people that need to have protection in order to achieve herd immunity, it varies by disease. At this point, we don't really know what the percentage of people that would need to get vaccinated to achieve herd immunity for this disease is, but we've heard some of the experts talk, 75% or so. Again, it's going to be dependent on a lot of things, including, some of the variants that maybe you've heard about in the news and other factors. But some of the numbers that have been thrown around thus far have been in the 75% or so number. So when can I get vaccinated? That's the other big question, right? So Missouri has several different phases that they've kind of put out there. The phases are up on your screen right now. So 1A was the first phase, which is pretty much completed or almost done. And it was really healthcare workers like myself. I was able to get vaccinated being a healthcare worker. Long-term care residents and staff, so anybody in a nursing home. And some of our frontline workers like EMS, EMT, and paramedics. So going to the next slide, and I'm going to talk about the next couple of phases here. Really, the next slide is phase 1B. My kids who are 6 and 8 would think it's cool that I have a dabbing policeman on your screen. So I wanted to point that out for them. So really, the phase 1B is protecting those that keep us safe and help us during an emergency. So it's your law enforcement, your fire services, emergency management, et cetera. So anybody that's going to help the general community to be safe, those are the people that are in phase 1B, and they've started getting vaccinated already. I know some firemen, for instance, that have already received the vaccine. So the next phase, which is phase 1B tier 2, and again, some of these folks have started to get vaccinated. We're pretty early on in this, but it's anyone that's 65 or older, or any adults that have various disease states that have kind of listed there, pregnancy, and some other folks with various chronic conditions. And really what you're seeing now is that people are able to sign up. There's multiple places that are accepting basically appointments at this point, and you're kind of put into a queue, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, later. So the next phase, which is phase 1B tier 3, they are not currently being vaccinated, but they're going to be next in line. And really, there are essential workers, and some of the people that are listed there are education, K through 12, and childcare. So that would be our great staff at Cornerstone, for instance, that are going to fall into this this next sector. So, and you can see some of the other folks that they're considering to be essential workers, including food and agriculture. So those are going to be our some of our businesses that provide essential services that are considered to be at risk. And then phase 2, which is the next step, and I'm not going to go too deep into that. You can see all the different folks there, but those are the folks that have been disproportionately affected, or those that are going to help to accelerate economic recovery. Again, I'm not going to go through everybody that's on there. You can kind of look at that for yourself. And then really phase 3 is basically anybody that's left. So that kind of just tells you a little bit about how, what the phases are in Missouri. And like I said, I think the important thing to realize is that when your time comes up, that's the time to get your vaccine. So you can sign up for multiple places. Pharmacies are going to soon be starting to offer the COVID vaccine, like CVS and Walgreens. So if you can get into a queue, get into multiple ones, and the first one that calls you, take advantage and go get vaccinated. So just again, talking about the current vaccines, the two major ones that you've heard about on the news are Pfizer and Moderna. Each of those are 2 shots. So the Pfizer is 21 days apart. The Moderna is about a month or 28 days apart. You cannot mix and match those. So if you get the Pfizer on your first dose, you need to get your Pfizer on your second dose. And believe me, all the pharmacies and clinics know that. So when you go and get your first vaccine, they're going to sign you up for your second appointment at that point in time, and make sure that you are getting the appropriate manufacturer on your second dose. There are a couple vaccines that are in phase 3 clinical trials, and there's different efficacy and some other information that's still yet to come out through those trials. They'll have to apply for an emergency use application with the FDA to get approved. One thing of note that I have there is Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is the only one that is a one-shot vaccine, and it's looking somewhere around March that they're going to be applying for their emergency use application. Again, just wanted to talk briefly on how the vaccines work, and believe me, I'm not going to get into the science, because there are people way smarter than me that know way more than me about how the vaccines work. Are you still sharing the screen, Karen? I think it might have come off there.
There we go.
All right. So, you know, you may have heard about messenger RNA, and again, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but basically messenger RNA just helps to encourage your cells to initiate an immune response to the virus that causes COVID. And basically you rely on proteins every day to keep your body healthy. So our bodies are constantly producing proteins. And basically the messenger RNA just tells our cells which proteins to make. And in this case, for the COVID vaccine, it would be telling our body to make antibodies to COVID. So one of the things that people ask is how did we produce this vaccine in record time? And really, we've been actually working on a vaccine for COVID or SARS for 10 years or more. But really, the messenger RNA technology, it's newer, and it's easier and quicker to produce. And that's what's also helped to accelerate the process for COVID-19. So the ingredients used by Pfizer and Moderna are the ones that contain the messenger RNA. They also have some lipids to help ensure that there's a safe delivery of the messenger RNA that helps to initiate the immune response. And the other thing that sometimes you hear with vaccines is that they have adjuvants, which basically is an ingredient that helps to elicit an immune response, such as aluminum salts. And they also have preservatives to help with the stability of the vaccine. Both of those, Pfizer and Moderna did not use either of that in the vaccine technology. So going to the next slide, just talking a little bit about the side effects. Hopefully you're not like the gentleman up in the cartoon that gets a tail after your vaccine. But really, overall, the vaccines have been tolerated very well. So you can see a little less than 9% had reported experiencing any reaction that they considered to interfere with daily activity. The most common that we saw was fatigue, headache, muscle pain, chills, and injection site pain, which are pretty similar to what you would see with the flu shot as well. Of note, more people tend to see side effects after the second dose than the first dose, which kind of makes sense, because when you get your first dose, you're kind of triggering your body to make your antibodies, and then the second dose comes along and your body is now saying that I'm going to look at that as a foreign body, and I've already started to produce antibodies for that. So for the Moderna trial, 9.1% reported local injection site reaction, and a little over 16% reported side effects, with, again, kind of the same side effects as the Pfizer. There were no specific concerns, and they did a very thorough study, including minorities, people of different ages, and they noticed really no concerns based upon the different subgroups that they had. So just a few of the frequently asked questions that people may have. Can you get COVID by taking the vaccine? The answer is no. This is not a live vaccine, so you cannot get COVID if you take this vaccine. Should you get the vaccine if you've already had COVID? The answer is yes. We don't really know how long the protection lasts after the infection. We know typically some of what we've seen is that within the first 90 days, you seem to have immunity, but after 90 days, we have seen cases where people have been reinfected with COVID. So it is recommended that you do get vaccinated, because this will help you to fight off the virus longer. Is it okay if you're pregnant or breastfeeding? So the answer is really yes. Again, there's more studies and more evidence that will come from that, but thus far there's no evidence to suggest that it's not safe, and that it's not safe either with pregnancy or with breastfeeding. Always consult with your physician, obviously, to talk about your risk versus benefit. But generally, the risk of getting COVID when you're pregnant is worse than the vaccine itself. So which vaccine should you take? The answer is the first one that's available. The quicker you get the vaccine, the quicker you get protection. So I already talked really about why the vaccine came to the market so quickly. And is it safe? It is safe. Again, I talked about the side effects. There have been very few major reactions to the vaccine. The most serious have been kind of anaphylactic or severe allergic reactions. It is a possibility, but they tend to be rare. And it's actually pretty easily treatable with an EpiPen or epinephrine. So most people that have had a severe reaction have had previous known hypersensitivity reactions in general. So that it is recommended that after the vaccine, you be observed for 15 minutes. And if you've had, more hypersensitivity type of reactions, even longer, like 30 minutes, it would be wise to be observed by. We've already talked about how you sign up for the vaccine, and again, that you can do it in multiple places. I have included a website up there that points to some of the venues that are administering vaccines. All the local hospitals are doing it, as well as health clinics. And again, soon pharmacies will be able to add that to their repertoire as well. And then the other question that people are asking is, when can my kids get their vaccine? And as Jenny kind of talked about, kids tend to be less affected by COVID. So right now, that hasn't been a major priority for the companies to try to figure out how to vaccinate children. I can tell you that there are clinical trials going on. In fact, one of my coworkers' children is in one of these trials, and based on what those trials show, I'm sure that in the future we'll see vaccines for the children as well. But again, it just hasn't been a priority as compared to some of the other population groups. And that was the end of my presentation.
Thank you both very, very much. I know I picked up some new information that I wasn't aware of, and I hope those that are in attendance tonight also have heard some new information. I'm going to unmute everyone. Go on mute. So if,
Yes.
so you can unmute yourself if you have a question for Dr. Jennifer Ladage or Dale Lewis. Since we are an intimate group right now, please feel free to ask questions, and we'll just be respectful of one another. Anybody would like to go first, please?
Like to go first.
Yeah, please. I hear Miss Deborah. Please, Miss Deborah.
Hi, I have a question. Like, I have a lot of allergies. Like, I'm allergic to penicillin, amoxicillin, all the cillins I'm allergic to. Does that make a difference with the shot? That
It does not. So if you are allergic to, thus far, there's no contraindications to any medical or medication that you may have an allergy to.
okay? Thank you.
The highest, the population with the most concern for having an adverse reaction are those who have had adverse reactions with other vaccines. So allergies in general aren't considered higher risk unless you've had allergic reactions to other vaccines. So.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions, please?
I had a stroke almost 2 years ago. Should I have any concerns about getting this vaccination?
From what we know, no.
Okay.
The adverse reactions have been very low. And again, mainly in people with histories of allergic reactions to vaccines.
Serena, you look like you had a question.
I have a question.
Go.
So I'm sorry if you may have touched on this before, but how long after you get your second dose does the vaccine begin to be effective? Is it right away or is it a matter of a few weeks?
Good question. And it's what they're saying is about 14 days. So after you get your second dose, it's about a 14-day window before you have full immunity.
Do they know anything else about like how does it protect against spreading to other people once you get the vaccine?
So, I mean, really, basically what you have is immunity. So, once you have immunity, you can't get the virus yourself. And because of that, just basically by interacting with others, you have the antibodies. So, if you think about it, right, you come in contact with things all the time, dirt, bacteria, etc. And over time, your body builds antibodies to all of that. And this is just another thing. So the virus or the vaccine helps you to produce the antibodies that you need so that when you become exposed to COVID, then you have the antibodies and you're just going to naturally fight it off as your natural protection would.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that I guess decreases your risk of infecting others, right?
Right. If you can't get it,
Right.
if you can't get it, you're not going to spread it to other people. And that's what leads to the herd immunity, that the more people that can't get the vaccine or the virus, the less people that can spread it. And then eventually it just dies out.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So then a question I have is, sorry, this is Danny. From what I've heard, like on the radio or on the news, they're saying even after you get the vaccine that you should consider or continue to social distance and wear your mask. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering what the reasoning is behind that. And then also if there's been any progress in figuring out how long your immunity lasts after the vaccine.
You want to take it?
Go ahead.
So I think the studies are hopeful that, I mean, they report the Pfizer and the Moderna at 95% efficacy, and the Johnson and Johnson at more around 75%. And my understanding is we don't know exactly how many are going to be fully protected and not able to carry it versus how many are just going to have a reduction in the severity of their disease. So, but, and this is where I'm like, maybe Dale, you have kind of the more basic science knowledge on this, but so I think because we don't know with certainty that continuing to maintain the measures that work, that we know work, until we get more people populated and we understand a little bit more. But do you want to add in on that, more on that 95% number?
Yeah. So that's part of it, right? Part of it is you're everybody that takes the vaccine isn't necessarily going to be one of the lucky ones that you're immune. So that's part of it. But the second part of it too is, think about it in society, right? So I've been vaccinated, so I theoretically don't have to wear a mask now, right? But right now, because we're so early into vaccinating people, how would it make you feel if I walked up to you and didn't have a mask on, right? So I think there's a little bit of that going on right now too, that we want to wear a mask because at this point we don't know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. I think, probably 4 to 6 months from now, we'll see that the need to wear a mask will be lifted because we're reaching the herd immunity situation. So there's some practical pieces to it, but also, what Dr. Ladaj had mentioned as well in terms of just people not being immune after their vaccine. And yeah, I think the other part of your question was how long. We don't really know at this point, just being honest. We're seeing very good protection thus far in terms of the trials. And again, the good thing is that anybody in the trial, nobody who has gotten COVID or that has been exposed has died, and I think that that's important to know too. So more to come. We just don't know what we don't know at this point.
And probably an additional factor, like we have to get vaccinated for the flu every year because flu is a vaccine that actually mutates to the point where the vaccines previously administered don't cover the new form. I think with COVID-19 being a novel virus, from what I understand, the new variants, the new mutations that we're seeing coming from Britain and South Africa, there is hope that the Pfizer and the Moderna will cover it. But I think that's also, is this virus going to mutate in such a way that then we're going to have to have yearly shots? But I think in general, it's hopeful that this will be a vaccine. So there's a couple of unknowns.
So I have a question. I have understood that there are some areas that have shortages on the vaccine. So therefore, if, let's say, someone received one vaccine, but one dose, but they need the second one, are they making sure that there's enough for that second one in advance? Or are there possibilities that there may not be when they go for a second shot, for the second one?
Yeah.
My understanding is that's a consideration when in the facilities that are dispensing it, and that they're signing people up for their second vaccine so that they can take account of that. But also know that my understanding is if you get the first one and you're delayed getting the second one, you don't have to repeat the first, and you can get it when it is available. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's very true. And, just telling you, because I work as part of BJC, and we have, over 40,000 employees. They're actually over 50,000 employees that we've offered the vaccine out to, and that's a consideration. So there's a lot of logistics to this. You've heard about, the storage requirements and, having freezers and all of that kind of stuff. But, making sure that you have your second dose, that is all part of the logistics that go on behind the scene as well.
Thank you.
This is Robin. I have a question. Do you need to get the shot, or are you supposed to get the shot like in the county and where you live, or does it matter?
It really doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So, part of this is that, it's all being tracked in terms of the fact that you're getting vaccinated. So
Okay.
we have to report all of this information. And the reason that we do that is for a number of reasons, but we also want to look at side effects. So, there's a reporting mechanism for side effects as well as just who has gotten the vaccine. So, but it does not really matter what county you get it in or even what state.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Miss Deborah asked, she was the first question about allergies and having allergic reactions to medicine, if that should be a concern. There are several staff members at Cornerstone, and they are at the high risk level. Are there any things to be considered before getting a vaccine if you have, MS, or I know also that Marky asked about, a stroke victim. Are there any areas that stick out?
I would say that many of the people with those conditions are at higher risk of maybe having more severe disease. And so the shot would be much more beneficial than a risk for them. I have not heard of any stipulations of who shouldn't get it, except for those who are actively sick should delay getting it. But do you have any more information, Dale?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. And by actively sick, you mean actively with COVID.
COVID, yeah. Or
yeah,
I guess high fever, or
yeah,
where their immune system may not respond as well. But
yeah, and I think it's, if you think about it, the more immunocompromised you are, or the more comorbidities you have, the bigger a deal it would be as if you got COVID, right? Because those are the people that we've seen have not fared as well, and therefore those would be the people that we would recommend to be at front of the line for the vaccine.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions at this time? No? Well, Dale and Dr. Ladage, you both gave us a lot of information. And I think it's an incredibly helpful, because with social media, and we're getting bombarded with so much information, sometimes not good information. So thank you. And it's very important that everyone receives good information so they can make the best decision. I am glad we recorded this tonight, because we will share it. And for those that weren't able to join us, and hopefully everyone can contemplate after listening to your words, and again, make the best decision. Thank you so much. And everyone that's here tonight, thank you for taking the time out. Dale and Dr. Ladash, thank you. I can't thank you enough for taking your time to be with us tonight, because I know you're both very busy with what you're doing. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for having us.
And I think just to underscore, both of us have had the opportunity to be vaccinated, and we are vaccinated. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and it's been overall well tolerated.
And I did not grow a tail, so just saying.
I would suggest if people are worried about the muscle aches, headaches, or those